Hey, Steve Stine from Guitar Zoom here. Thank you so much for joining me. Today what we're going to be doing is looking at how we can use the concept of shell voicings to change our perspective on the way that we view soloing, and we're going to use blues as our example today. So make sure that you're tuned up, and when you are, come on back and let's get started. All right, so first of all, what we're going to do is we're just going to look at some traditional dominant seventh chords. We're going to look at the A7 chord, we're going to look at the D7 chord, and we're going to look at the E7 chord. Now, before I get started in this conversation, what I want you to understand is what you're doing now isn't necessarily wrong, okay? There's nothing wrong with playing an A7 like this or whatever you might do, or a full D7 or D7 down here. I'm just trying to give you a different perspective on how to think about your soloing if you find that your soloing tends to just sound more like a pentatonic scale all the time. So we're going to look at those three chords: A7, A dominant 7, D7, D dominant 7, and E7. And we're going to use the minor pentatonic, A minor pentatonic, as our scale kind of backdrop. So we're going to use this scale right here. Okay? So what we're going to do here is, first let's talk about what a shell voicing is. Basically, what a shell voicing does is we're going to try and take the notes that are most crucial to the tonality of that chord, and we're going to try and take those notes and bring them to the surface, okay? We're going to take the other notes that aren't as important to the tonality, the quality, the uniqueness of that chord, and we're going to eliminate them. So the first one we're going to get rid of is the fifth. Now, if you know anything about your theory, you know that triads, a chord, like a major chord, is built on a root and a third and a fifth, okay? Now, why would we get rid of the fifth? Well, if we think about the minor pentatonic, for instance, it contains what we call the fifth. It's called a perfect fifth, if you know what that is. If I play major pentatonic, it also contains that fifth. So the fifth overlaps in both minor pentatonic and major pentatonic. And if we think about it, the fifth, if we're looking at the chords, so if we look at an A major chord, that has a fifth as well. If we look at a minor chord, that also has a fifth. So it's not really a defining note in terms of the quality of that chord. If we wanted to play an A dominant seventh chord or an A7 chord, the fifth isn't really adding anything that makes it unique. So we're going to drop that out of there, okay? So what we're left with is the root, the major third, and the minor seventh, which sometimes I refer to as the dominant seventh, just so you know what I'm talking about, but it's the minor seventh. Okay, so we've got the root, the major third, and the minor seventh here. So those are the notes that we're going to try and target. Okay, now let's look at the D chord. Now we have a D major chord sitting right here. We can make it into a D7 right here, which is fine. But again, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the root, the major third, and the minor seventh. And you're going to notice it's the same shape. And then we've got our 5 chord, which we would just take the 4 and move it up 2 frets. And we'd have our 5 chord sitting right there. Okay? Now that's not really enough though, right? We need a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this exact same thing, the root, the major third, and the minor seventh, but we're going to expand it over some more of these strings, okay? So if we looked at this major, this dominant seventh that I'm playing right here, this shell voicing, I'm playing the root, the major third, the dominant seventh or minor seventh, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up, okay, and I'm going to add some other notes on. So if I took those 3 notes, if I went right here, that'd be that major third all over again. And then if I went up here, that'd be the dominant seventh again, or the minor 7. Okay, and if I went up again, there's another major third. So what this is telling me is that really what I need is the major third and that minor seventh. If you think about it logically, the root is being used in both the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic, and it's also being used in the major chord and the minor chord, right? So strangely enough, even the root isn't necessarily the note that makes the tonality of that chord. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't play the root or you shouldn't play the fifth and you shouldn't emphasize those. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you listen to this example, if I was to take the A dominant 7, the shell voicing, the D dominant 7, and the E dominant 7, and I played a little vamp just using these 3 chords, little bluesy thing here. Okay, sounds fine. Okay, doesn't really need the 5th or anything like that, but let's take this one step further. Let's take this A7 shell voicing that I'm doing right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this note right here. I just learned that I could take that, that's the major 3rd, and play it an octave higher. Well, I'm actually going to convert my shell voicing to look like this right now. So I've got my root, my minor 7th, and now I just put my 3rd, my major 3rd up here instead. And the reason I did that is I want you to notice this. These 2 right here on the 4th and 3rd strings, that's the major 3rd and the minor 7th of the A chord. If I move back 1 fret, it's the major 3rd and dominant 7th of the D. And if I move up 2 frets higher, it's the major 3rd and dominant 7th of the E. So I wind up with these 2 notes, which are the A, these 2 notes, which are the D, and these 2 notes, which are the E. Now, the first time I ever saw this was in Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. If you've ever learned that song, there's a section in there that he does this little, and then he does that little thing. And I never knew what it was until much later, but that's exactly what's happening. So now if I take this same idea that I did this, but instead of playing the root on all those, I'm just going to play these 2 shell voicings right here, or these 3, which look the same, right? So 1, 2, 3, here's my A. 4 chord, 5, so really it's those 2 notes right there that are really defining the characteristic of those chords, those dominant 7th chords, are the major 3rd and the minor 7th. So, and again, I don't mean to say the same thing over and over and over, but it doesn't mean all the other notes aren't important. Of course they are. But what I want you to do now is I want you to start thinking about the major 3rd and the dominant 7th, the major 3rd and the dominant 7th, and the major 3rd right there. So if we were to think about our minor pentatonic, right there. And I love to go from my minor 3rd to my major 3rd. So I can use the minor pentatonic as sort of a vehicle to be able to get to one of these notes and try and emphasize those. You see? So I'm using minor pentatonic, but I'm using the major 3rd and the dominant 7th or minor 7th as sort of the directives as I go. Now let's do exactly the same thing with the D7. So if we think about our D7 sitting here, there it is. And again, D is very important, no doubt, but we want to focus on the major 3rd and the minor 7th. Well, those 2 notes exist right here. So if we were on the D chord in our 12-bar blues, for instance, this would be a great note to go to. Now, I'm going to use some other things, obviously, and right now I'm going to keep it as simple as possible, but, I would use the minor pentatonic surrounding this. Now, there's other scales that we can get into, like Mixolydian and different kinds of things like that, major pentatonic, obviously. But for now, let's just focus on the sounds of this. And then our E chord comes up and we can do exactly the same thing. Okay, so when we've got the A chord playing, here comes the D. normal stuff in there. And then here comes my D again. So then I think, okay, well, let's figure something out. Back to the A. Okay, here comes the E. Now I could move up. And then D comes up. Back to the A, right? Now there's lots of different ways we can do this. We might move some of this E chord over here, so I can play some licks over here. But the point is, the closer I can get all of these ideas in the same position on my fretboard, the more I can just simply kind of roll from one idea to the next and really accentuate some of those notes that are different and unique, as opposed to just playing the pentatonic all the time over all three chords where you're getting the same tonality, right? If I do this over the A and then D comes up, and then E comes up, I'm just getting the same thing over and over and over. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I might be able to really use that. But if I start thinking logically about how to... Here comes that 4 chord. And then here comes the 5 chord. 4 chord. To 1. You see? So it's a great thing to kind of explore. And the most important advice I can give you with this is just take your time. Okay, don't really worry about trying to play along with the jam track and that sort of thing. Just explore the sounds, because once you start learning how to do this, that's not the only thing that you're going to do. I mean, you're still going to use your blues licks or, some of the different patterns that you might have learned how to play with pentatonic and those sorts of things. You're going to add all that in. It's just now what it does is it gives you kind of a direction to go with your solos, as opposed to just, well, I'm going to emphasize A over A and then D over D and E over E. This would give you a little bit more color and a little more uniqueness, because you're really trying to emphasize those 2 notes that are defining each one of those 3 chords. So anyway, hopefully this helped you a little bit. Please comment below and let me know if it made some sense to you and if it's helping you with your playing. Remember to take your time with it and just focus, right? When you practice, try and learn how to use it. Don't just try and grab the idea and, go back to the old ways. If you can find some way of using it in your playing and kind of elevate your playing to another level, that's the whole point. So if you like this video, please do me a favor. Again, share it, subscribe to the channel. You can always check out my stuff at guitarzoom.com if you're looking for any kind of guitar lessons or education of that sort. So take care, stay positive, and I'll talk to you soon.